Welcome to the February meeting of TriEmbed. Happy Valentine's Day to everyone. Hope you got lots of Valentines in the mail. Like Charlie Brown or something, right?
I get hate mail.
Okay. I got bills.
That's what I got today.
I got a Make magazine.
Oh.
Yep. I got that yesterday, I think. And and one from the IEEE came yesterday also.
All right. So there are no newcomers this month. Any announcements? Things going on? Nothing going on. Rob, did the Forge Initiative had their robot game thing a couple weeks back? Is that right?
So we had one in December, the one with the floating balls.
That was December?
Yeah.
Wow.
And then, so that was really fun. We levitated a bunch of balls on air columns and the Coanda effect, and there was a game where people collected balls with robots and took them somewhere. We're now at the point where most of the Lego robotics people have finished their competition. Only the ones who are going on, I think, to championships are left. And then the ones who build the like 18 by 18 by 18 inch cube industrial robots, which is FTC, they are having on Saturday their state level competition in Greensboro. So if you're interested, there's live streams of that this weekend. And then we'll see if any of the teams, we have several teams from the Forge who've made it to state, and we'll see if any of them go on to World Championship. And then the team that Glenn and I both mentor and coach with is meeting 3 to 4 times a week and is putting their robot together, and it's finally beginning to come together, which is kind of cool. It needs to throw balls that are just a little bit bigger and lighter than a basketball, and it needs to climb some monkey bars, which is quite exciting. It's the monkey bars are spread to make that really part of the challenge. Is that the way they define the size and shape of the robot is when the robot's on the ground, it looks like a standard competition robot, 32 inches by 20 some inches or whatever the right frame is. They defined it that you could only extend out 12 inches in any direction. And the box you have to stay in is the box that's orthogonal to the plane of the wheelbase. In other words, if your robot leans over, you can reach up as high as you want, but you can't up in the direction of the robot, but not up in terms of gravity. So your extensions are very limited if you leave that column that your wheelbase defines. So imagine a hook and ladder where the ladder can go straight up, but if you lean the truck over, it can no longer go straight up. It has to go up at an angle to match the lean of the wheelbase. Okay, some interesting challenges there. Anybody wants to see how the students are doing with that? It's clumsy and difficult still, but they're working on it. We meet Tuesday, Wednesday, sometimes Thursday, and always Saturday. If you're interested, just reach out to me or Glenn, and we'll make sure someone knows you're coming and you can come see where they are. It's incredibly valuable to have people who know what they're doing show up and ask, can you tell me how you came up with that and how that's going to work? Because every time a student articulates something that they've never done before to someone that they think has critical thinking abilities, they learn a little bit more about what they hadn't thought of yet. They don't need you to tell them how to do it. They're not even ready for that yet. Just to figure out the words to explain to you what they think they're doing is actually a giant step.
That's a giant step in life in general.
Oh, isn't it?
Explain what it is you're doing.
That's almost like having your identity figured out. Anyway, that's a long story for a short question.
All right, thank you. Any other announcements, things going on? No. All right. Let me share my screen.
Out in the cold.
Yeah. I want to start from the current slide. All right, so this month's problem of the month. So I have this plant that one night when it got down to 32 or maybe 31, he's not very happy. So I have a number of plants that I take in and out during the winter. Every night that it's going to freeze, I bring them into the garage. And then many of the days after it's above freezing, I take them back outside into the driveway. So I would like to get a notification of some sort. If it's after 5 o'clock and it's going to freeze tonight and the plants are still outside in the driveway.
Good grief.
And so the real question is, how can I tell whether the plants are outside in the driveway or crammed in the garage?
Well, I would think that a really important aspect. Oh, sorry, Carl.
No problem.
Air tags.
How frequently is your garage really full of stuff? Because it seems like it might be easy to know not are the plants outside, but are they inside?
Fair enough. Yeah, I don't care, whether it's a 0 or a 1. So, I certainly have more facilities inside as far as power and shelter from rain and other things. So, I'm happy to do, are the plants inside?
So what color is the inside of the garage door?
I have a switch on the garage door. Maybe that's not your question. What color is the inside of the garage door?
Right. Can you differentiate between green and beige, for example? If you drove a car into the garage, which is totally impossible in my garage.
Of course it is.
The garage door would be at the rear of the car, and where I put the plants is at the front of the car. I don't know if that makes a difference.
Well, a better question might just be, can you differentiate background from plant color?
Sure. So you're saying put a camera somewhere like where this one is and
just look at the camera.
Check 1 or 2 pixels to decide whether it's looking at the firewall or a bunch of leaves.
Just yourself a reminder to look at the output of the webcam at 5 o'clock.
Well, that's no fun. I can just have it tell me to bring the plants in.
So my idea was actually if you had like a green screen would be a bad answer, but a yellow screen behind on the other side of which you've got it lined up, so you've got a yellow screen. That's where then the plants, then a camera. So the camera is looking at the yellow screen, and if the camera at 5 o'clock and temperature is low discerns that it has more green in the picture than typical, it says, "Oi, mate, do your thing where you change the color here."
Okay.
So I've got a completely different approach.
Good.
So what gas do plants emit?
Methane.
Oxygen. If they're
Is
photosynthesizing, which they probably aren't inside my garage.
Right.
They aren't if the temperature's below 48 degrees, period.
Okay.
So I don't know if it's possible to detect the oxygen density within the garage. And this is completely speculative here, because if you can, and if the plants make a difference, you may be able to use a sensor to determine whether or not the plants are there.
Right. So an interesting thing we do at the Forge is we run a CO2 sensor to detect if we're moving air through from outside to inside, because humans breathe out a lot of CO2. And it's very interesting that as the sun goes down,
right,
there is a clear difference in the amount of, we can easily tell you if the sun has gone down, because if we keep exactly the same air circulation, there's a dramatic difference in the amount of CO2 we see after sunset versus before sunset. I'm not sure that's helpful here, but it's interesting to know that plants do make a significant difference in the ambient air around us during the daytime. And as soon as the sun goes down, that difference, the whole ambient atmosphere becomes much more CO2 rich.
Yeah, so I mean, you can either
have a CO2 sensor.
Yeah, so you can either use an oxygen sensor or a CO2. So one is going to be higher when the plant is there, and the other one's going to be lower when the plants are there.
If you've got a sun lamp.
I will, let me just switch to...
Maybe not. Like I said, it's speculative. I don't know how much of a difference you're going to get, but it may be worth trying.
You've got to have photosynthesis is not active at below about 48 degrees.
Soil.
So do any of your plants stay in one fixed position? And do you have set places they go?
Roughly, I could be more exact if it assisted.
So an ultrasound or an IR detector could detect the pot even outdoors, right? Or a weight sensor.
Wait, let me write all these down. So ultrasound.
Or a IR range detector or a weight sensor, all of those could detect the pot even outdoors.
So a weight sensor in the garage that would say whether the plants were in or not. It's never the case that I can recall that some of the plants have been in and some of the plants have been out. So ultrasound, so distance to pot.
So where do these plants go in the summertime? In the house?
Florida.
Outside. They stay outside. They only come in when it's cold at night.
Okay.
So I'm showing on one of the pots, I don't know if you remember when I showed off my soil probe. It's
right.
2 nails that go into the dirt. And this is a year's worth of, 3 months worth of data on that thing. And from this, you're supposed to be able to tell when it rained. I can't tell. So sometimes you collect lots of data that you have troubles interpreting. And so I suspect that might be the case with like the oxygen sensor, the CO2 sensor. It might vary wildly if I open the door and go outside and close the door. Just because of, I don't know what, something inside the house versus outside the house. But, okay, so ultrasound to just weight sensor.
Or just a film of stress sensor that you put on the concrete that you put the pot on top of, something that can detect the weight on top of it. Right? They sell a plastic that if you put weight on the plastic, it changes its conductivity. Although I don't know what weather and temperature does to that.
Yeah.
If somebody's got a radio on, could you turn it down or kill it? It'll be in the recording if you don't.
Hey, that worked.
Sorry about that. I was unmuted because I was hanging on to pipe in here. What if you put a temperature sensor in probably the smallest pot? that would transmit your temperature of the soil of the pot. Yes, it wouldn't tell you. You wouldn't necessarily want to use it as at under 32. Bring me in, but you could see a trend in the outside temperature of the pot, and presumably the pots are going to maintain a higher temperature inside the garage, given that that's the whole goal of the whole process.
Yeah. So I do have a temperature probe outside one of the garage doors here. And I have a temperature probe inside the garage. But so let's imagine that it's going to freeze tonight. The temperature of the pot is above freezing.
Do you have is your moisture sensor an ESP-based moisture sensor?
Yes.
Most ESP chips have a thermometer built in.
This is an 8266,
Oh.
but I can easily add a Dallas chip to it.
So if you had an inside and an outside temperature gauge already, and you have a temperature gauge on one of the plants,
yeah,
then what you're doing is it's the equivalent of an op amp, right? If the outside and inside are very close, if the outside and inside are different, meaning that you have inside is better and the pot matches one or the other closely, then you know where it is, right?
Right.
If it's 30 degrees out and the pot says 31 to 29, the pot's outside. Bad temperatures, you don't want it outside then. If the inside one is saying 40 and the outside one and the pot are both saying 35, that's kind of a clue that the pot's outside, isn't it?
Yep. But what if it's been cold and it's 40 inside and it's 38 outside and it's going down to 19 or something and the pot says I'm at 39?
Sounds like your garage isn't going to do the pot much good at that point.
Oh, it will. No, it'll
okay.
it'll do a lot. I mean, it'll keep it from going. So I'm just concerned that I wouldn't know the right answer until 2 in the morning.
Right. Until outside got cold and inside didn't.
Yeah.
Right. If inside and outside don't generally differentiate until it's very cold, that isn't a good plan.
I can show you. So where's my dashboard? So the orange line is outside and the green line is inside. So this was when it got up to 70 or something, 60.
What's the yellow?
I don't remember. That's the battery of the soil probe. And it goes up and down with the temperature. Yeah, well, we can turn that one off. So, you know, it was 70 on Friday. Or was that Saturday? 70 on Saturday. And then it got cold. It only made it up to 50 on Sunday. And it got cold. And today it got up to 46 or something. So there is a difference, you know, when it's going to get down cold.
So going back to your pictures of your plants, don't you have one that's kind of a tree? Yeah.
2, yeah.
Yeah, you got one. So I'm being silly. You don't have to put the temperature sensor in the pot. You put the temperature sensor in a tree limb.
Okay.
And so if the temperature sensor on the tree limb, temperature sensor on the tree limb follows the plant. It doesn't, you know, so it's going to be measuring ambient temperature.
Yep.
So if tree limb, so now you've got a new graph that says tree limb temp, which essentially is following the curve of one of these two.
The orange one. Right. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Do you keep the lights in your garage on when you have the plants there?
No.
Well, if you took one of the $5 ESP-based cameras with a temperature sensor and pointed up to the sky.
From a pot, yeah.
From a pot, then
okay.
If it gets light, then it'll be light.
Not at 7 o'clock at night.
It'll be dark.
It'll be dark.
So you can.
But if I put it in the garage and look up, it'll be dark because I don't have the light on. But I like the thought.
I assume that the plants come in en masse. They don't. You wouldn't just bring in one or two of them.
Correct.
Yeah. So it seems to me like if you put you can monitor three temperature sensors, and one of them is going to be tracking the inside or the outside temperature, and that is essentially when it matches, it will tell you where which one it matches tells you where the plants are.
Okay.
Right. The challenge with that was the one I had proposed and what he brought up is, for example, if the garage door has been open for a while and then gets closed, the garage air may be very similar to the outside air until a significant amount of time goes by, and it may not know until it's too cold that which one's which, right? It's sort of like the light problem. If there are external conditions which may be hard to map, it would be better than having nothing, but there may be a more reliable way to do it.
So in here, the two track very closely until 6 p.m. or so.
Right.
And you wouldn't get a good difference until 7, which is fine. I don't mind knowing at 10 o'clock. So maybe if I change my thing and always see that, at 10 o'clock, there's quite a difference before it gets down to freezing.
Right. Just change your algorithm so it says it's okay that it texts you at 9 or 10 rather than texting you at 5.
Yep.
Right. And you certainly clearly already have the ability to monitor temperature. So tossing a third temperature sensor at the system and then watching your data for a little bit would be able to give you some edge cases and some data to be able to interpret.
Okay. Adding it to the soil probe box. I don't know if we can tell in the picture or not. So the soil probe, how can I zoom in on this? View, zoom. Really? Okay. The soil probe has the nails that stick down, and then there's a little box I 3D printed that just hangs on the lip of the pot, and I could put the temperature probe right there, so it would be in the ambient air and not, these don't get much sun. This is kind of the east side of the house, and so they don't get baked in the afternoon to have nice warm pots. Okay, any other ideas?
Well, your sun suggestion, if you put even just a small solar cell on them, if the solar cell generates any electricity during the period of time leading up to 5 p.m., it's a fair bet that it's outside. I don't imagine that there's enough ambient sunlight or light in your garage to generate, well, it might generate some electricity, but it's not going to generate as much.
Okay, so a solar cell or maybe a light sensor.
So the light sensor, I feel like, would be able to would see the ambient light in your shop, depending on how many windows you have in the shop. But it wouldn't. It seems like a small solar cell would be able to generate much less. Would be discernibly different from interior to exterior.
Yeah, the solar cell is less sensitive.
All right, so here's another idea. So every night I carry 5 pots, and then I hand truck 2 big pots. If I just added another one, right, which wasn't really a plant, it was just another pot that I take in and out. And when it's outside, I put it in one orientation. And when it's inside, I put it in a different orientation with either a micro switch or a mercury switch or something that can distinguish which orientation I've put it in.
A compass.
A compass, a magnetometer gyro.
Yeah.
So some kind of orientation sensor.
What about just a magnet and then have something to detect the magnetic field when this little marker pot is in the garage?
Perfect.
So a magnet and Hall effect sensor?
Yeah.
Or a weight plate, anything. As long as you put one of the pots in the same place every time, you just need a way to detect a pot.
Yep.
Is there a clear path, I hesitate to ask, between where the plants live outside and inside? Could
Yes.
you just put them on a pallet and roll the pallet in and out?
So my mom used to have a wooden ladder that we took a wagon and cut it in half and put the back wheels on one end of the ladder and the steerable wheels on the other end of the ladder. And she had a whole bunch of staghorn ferns or something that hung out in trees, and she would hang them from the rungs of the ladder and roll this monstrosity in and out of the garage. I don't have enough space for a pallet. But I could imagine something the size of a wagon that would have some of the plants on it that I could pull.
How about a wagon train?
Well, there's a little bit of a 90-degree turn I have to
Pull wagon
take.
that together.
And I don't mind taking a couple of trips, right? So I take the hand truck and I take one pot in and go back out and get the other pot for the 2 big trees.
The plants, though, when they're outside, look like they're about the size of a pallet.
They are, but in here they're all inside. They're all kind of lined up in a row from there to there. Whereas here they're more in a clump.
Couldn't reorganize the garage?
Sometimes, so when the plants are in, I can't get from one side of the garage to the other side of the garage.
Such an innocent sounding question, though.
It is. AT&T just put fiber in our neighborhood, and so they're doing some deals on fiber internet. And so I was able to go from 15 megabit to 500 megabit, and the price dropped from $62.50 a month to $55 a month. And I had to make space for the technician to walk through here and get to where my network closet is on the other side of these plants. And so I spent a day making a path that was 3.5 feet wide instead of 2.5 feet wide, and extended well beyond where it used to. So at some point I would love to spend more time cleaning out my garage, but this task is not the catalyst for doing it. All right, any other ideas? All right. Well, thanks for all the suggestions. What I was thinking before I presented this was to have some kind of a device on the floor that I would set one of these pots on, and it would be a micro switch or something that detected whether a pot was on it or was not on it. Let's do the aardvark status update. I don't know if Pete or Nick wants to start that.
I think
I'm trying.
Has an agenda. I don't generally cotton to agenda things, but that's.
I'll be right back.
What was that, Nick?
I'm not good.
He's deferring to you.
Well, Nick has something to show after this.
But I don't have an agenda. I might be on the agenda, but I.
Well, I'm blaming Nick and Rob for some of this content here.
I'm a good scapegoat.
So we don't have any newbies. So some of this stuff is going to be familiar and just aimed at the contingency that there were new attendees. So this is just an overview of what the project is that we've covered in the past. The ESP32 has a fantastic application base and libraries and tools and every other thing, and a mixed signal FPGA is a very intriguing thing to start exploring. We've started, I'll be getting to it shortly, but there are a number of milestones to report. We're still expecting to make a very inexpensive board that combines the ESP32 and mixed signal FPGA, and we actually have a couple of them in hand now. And just to repeat the obvious, we're enabling techies to be making FPGAs more accessible is really a primary goal, and especially folks that don't even know what they are, and let alone have any current interest. So here's some of the progress. Many of you attended the January 24th working group meeting, and we, in conjunction with that, agreed that we don't need to immediately start a nonprofit or do much of anything in terms of organization. We also discussed the prototype work. And this next thing is just an invite for anybody that isn't in the working group, but I have a feeling everybody's in it as I think about that. So we've got hardware milestones. The first version of the ESP32C3 and Dialog FPGA was created a few weeks ago, and we spun the board. We realized that it took a special kind of USB serial dongle to program the ESP32. It turns out the way the ESP32 programs, or the way you put it into programming mode, where it's running its little ROM code to flash itself, is to manipulate the data terminal ready and request to send signals that the USB chips decode, and those in turn, those are pulling the strings on those two signals are standard STTY type operations. I don't know how it. I'm sure there's in section 2 of the well, I don't even know how it works on Windows, but I can tell you. Oh my God, my batteries have got 7%. Just 1 second. Come on, lights. Yep. Did it in time. Okay. So the version 60 .60 board was completed, and we've made 3 copies, and those are in the hands of Nick and Rob and I. And the .70 board is also in hand, but the solder paste stencil appears to be lost in space. It was allegedly leaving Sedalia, Colorado 7 days ago. And the post office assures me that it's still on its way, but I'm probably going to order it again tomorrow. And if I ever order anything else with this was not first class mail, this was priority mail, but a separate incident convinced me that I need to spend the rest of my life avoiding first class mail. So I won't be ordering anything else in my life with first class mail, because when the wheel of fortune spins, it takes a ridiculous amount of time. But anyway, I was saying that the first board has nothing but provisions for connections to its the ESP32 serial input, and we discovered that very, very, very few USB to serial dongles can control both DTR and RTS, and that happens to be the mechanism. There has to be a pair of controllable signals to boot it, using to bootstrap and load code into the ESP32. So anyway, we decided to put a USB chip on the next board. The .70 board is an extra ½ inch long. I think it's 3.5 inches by 1, and it also has a user programmable LED so that you can get to Blinky with it. The plan is to populate these 3 boards and make them available to interested people. In order to make the .60 board usable, I put USB chips on breakout boards, and they're wired up. All 3 of them are wired up in a similar fashion. At this point, we're talking about going in 2 directions. One is refining or getting the firmware for the .70 board in place and refining that, and making it, publishing it in some way to Dialog and Dialog users to try to get interest in this board. And what it is expected to do at this point, as well as supporting applications, it's expected to be able to program the FPGA chip, and that's something that Nick's been working on very, very diligently, and Rob's starting to exercise the code too. Is getting set to exercise that aspect of it. So with the onboard USB chip with the .70, it's pretty much got the functionality that it needs to act as a programmer. And one other enhancement of the .70 is an extra row of female headers. It fits right in between the 2 headers, the 2 rows of headers that the FPGA plugs into, and the middle 2 pairs of female headers accepts the standard dialog programming adapter, which is a 2x10 male pin termination. So in theory, this .70 board will be able to program dialog chips, either the single one, the DIP chip that plugs in, and there may be some additional boards mounted on breakouts. We haven't found one yet, but there may well be some out there. And it will also support arbitrary chips in the special socket. What would you call it? It's like a it's a little gadget that you can put a surface mount chip inside, and you close it all up, and it makes proper contacts with the underside pads of the integrated circuit. So it should be eventually usable as a programmer, and in conjunction with that, we expect to be able to make applications using the dialog chip. And I should point out that once it's programmed, the dialog chip can be unplugged and put in an application, such as, say, detecting plants in a garage or something along those lines. It's got a built-in thermometer, temperature sensor, and lots of capabilities.
What is the status of components, things on the BOM?
The status of the components are that the USB chip is unobtainium in the United States, and I'm having to buy Arduino Nanos and take the USB chips out. So as soon as the Chinese New Year clears up, I'm going to promote the idea that we buy some USB chips. We're using the CH340C. There are one or two other items. In fact, let me jump to the BOM. Here's the BOM for the current boards. And the seventh item down is the CH340C USB chip. That one is quite inexpensive from China and literally unobtainium. If anybody comes across a US source for that chip, I'm very interested, because I have exactly two more. I can't actually populate all three of the .70 version boards without coming up with a third one of these things. The ESP32C3 is available in the States, and for a price approaching $3. We're confident that we can get it from offshore for $2 or even less. The dialogues, we have 60 of those in hand. Nick's got one, Rob's got one, Chuck has got one for sure, and I've been promising Paul that I would get one. Oh no,
Yeah, I have one.
That's right. We traded. Yep. I forgot that we connected, and I got some great glue from the Hobby Lobby that day. So that was very successful. What else? The regulator is also problematic finding it in the States, but extremely inexpensive and plentiful overseas. Nothing else is a difficulty as far as sourcing. The PCB, the printed circuit boards, are pricey from Osh Park. So the current one is 3.5 square inches, 2 layers, and it ends up costing what is that? That's like about $17.50 for a set of 3 boards. So it's pretty expensive. But we're expecting to source the PCBs from offshore. And they'll be anywhere from something ridiculous up to maybe $2 a piece. And that includes not just the small boards, but the larger ones. Let me loop back to this. Can you see my mouse pointer?
Yes.
Okay, so right here with version 80, we're talking about a kind of a fork in the road where the 70 board is pursued to make the programmer, but also with the capability of making apps and being able to work in conjunction with the FPGA for an application. But we also want to make a board that has a very generous area for user devices, additional devices on the board. By going offshore, we can get 10 by 10 centimeter boards for next to nothing. They're extremely inexpensive. The shipping, however, is not inexpensive. If you want shipping with a reasonable lead time. We're very, very fond of DHL, but you have to be buying a reasonable amount of stuff to justify the cost. The DHL starts at about $35, but it delivers things really fast.
Well, I've used JLC PCB and just did their regular shipping, and I've gotten stuff in like 12 days from the day I ordered it.
That's excellent. Yeah, and we are looking at that one, Carl. In fact, I've been looking at that in PCBWay. PCBWay has a very strange pricing situation, though. I was telling the others earlier.
They're more expensive too.
It's more expensive, but here's the weird part. If you order 10 boards from PCBWay, the price per board is ridiculous, like $1 or $2 or something. Then try plugging quantity 50 in. The price per board goes up with a larger volume. I still can't figure out what the hell, like what planet do they think they're occupying? So I'm thinking I'll just order, arrange to send orders for 10. No, I'm not going to play with that. Like 5 orders of 10 boards. But the DHL, sorry, I've forgotten the source starting with the letter D is definitely attractive. And so anyway, we're designating this version 80, but we might well change its name to reflect the fact that it's on a different track. And currently, all of the logic and all of the stuff that's on the .70 board can be moved to this 10 by 10 centimeter form factor with a very, very roomy layout and still leave more than half of the board uncommitted. So that's where that's going.
Yep. Oh, thank you. Oh.
Whoops.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, the next working group meeting will be February 28th. We'll stick with JITC because of the Omicron situation, although it looks like Omicron is fading.
You mean Omicron?
Good news. One thing that's come up is what we would want to put on one of these 10 by 10 centimeter boards. And one thing that I've thought about is a thermostat for a space heater. And so if you browse the CAD files, there are PDFs of the schematic and the layout, and currently the .80 board's got a solid state relay sitting on it. But it's really just open as far as what people would be interested in seeing on that board. So if anybody's got any ideas, say again?
I'm working towards a demo project on the board, which is a neuromuscular input, in that you can put a patch on your skin. I'll use the op amps to gain that up, and then use a servo motor. So I want to be able to control a servo motor with muscular inputs. That's what I'm playing with for a demo. Whether I can do it or not, it's another story. But
right,
that's my target.
Cool. Anybody else got any ideas?
A breadboard area.
We could conceivably stick a breadboard on top on the uncommitted area.
Or I think what he was saying was more of like a perf board area.
Yeah, perf board, right? With power and ground rails and little things that you can solder to but don't really go anywhere.
Oh, I see what you mean. Right.
That's more valuable than just blank.
Well, yeah, right. So, right. But the key thing is that people could just ignore that. I mean, they could just pull that off and use the space for arbitrary applications. But that's an interesting point to make an area. We've all probably seen the proto boards that Adafruit sells that have the same form factor as an Arduino Nano, and have they're kind of a perf board format like that. Any other ideas?
Right. You don't want to use a breadboard because the sticky stuff of the breadboard, if you went to take it off to use that area for something else, wouldn't help you much.
Or we could use something else to stick it that wouldn't be problematic. There are double back tapes. They're like 3M makes some double back adhesives that'll come off very, very easily and not make a mess. But that's an excellent point. When you take that layer off, that shiny layer off the bottom of a breadboard, and you stick it on something, you can't get it back off without destroying it. It not only does it leave a big mess, it randomly pulls the guts, the little metal strips out of it.
Yeah,
and
I've experienced that as well, Pete.
Yeah, this is the voice of experience. I had an extremely unpleasant exercise with that. So
I got a couple of examples in the other room I could show you.
Examples in the other room?
Failures where you pull
the
foam
attempt
off.
to remove breadboards from circuit boards and try to recover it, and notice the breadboard gets all gutted out.
Okay.
So in other words, it's not a good idea to put a breadboard on there.
No, I agree that well, using the adhesive on the bottom of the breadboard, it's strictly, once you do that, that's going to be there forever, or else you're going to wish that it had been there forever.
I generally stick my breadboards using the adhesive to a piece of Gorilla Tape, razor cut around it, and then use the Gorilla Tape against the PC board.
Yeah. Yeah, very good. I use 3M EHS in extremely small quantities. Okay, well, let's move on. I will publish these slides, and they've got some interesting links. Ooh, something just happened. I guess I'm still running. Okay. Anyway, just to finish up, we've got pointers to the repositories. The League repository is really to augment the, provide references and stuff for the working group, whereas the aardvark. Say again?
Oh, good. You guys haven't been able to hear me for about 4 or 5 minutes. I'm sorry to interrupt. I just needed to find out if you could hear me now.
No.
Yeah,
I'll drop all the earlier comments.
We can't hear anything you're saying. Nothing.
Yeah, I can't hear anything.
Okay, well, I've spoken several times and you couldn't hear me, and I confirmed that with Glenn, and now I understand that my microphones were screwed up. I've straightened them out. I'll shut up and get out of the way.
Okay. Well, we'll give you a couple minutes here to catch up. So just to wrap up, the aardvark workspace, repository, is for the hardware designs of the boards, and there is a corresponding repository on Bitbucket for the firmware that Nick is working on. Also, here's a link to the working group meeting notes from the 24th, and I will see if I can arrange for that to be a link that you can click on. And this is that same bomb information, so that's pretty much it. Any questions?
Can you cut and paste those to the chat window?
Cut and paste what?
The 3 links on the previous slide.
I might be able to. That wasn't good. Nope. Well, one more try.
I think Nick just did it.
I can't get the.
Nick did it for you.
Nick did it. Yeah.
Someone's already done it.
It's already been done.
Yep.
Thank you, sir.
Nick did it.
Yeah, Nick did it for you.
Okay. I don't have anything else.
Well,
so over to Rob.
My application then.
Yes.
I'm sorry. Say again.
When you were talking about various applications, I was trying so hard to ask about one, and every time I spoke up, you all acted like I hadn't said anything since my microphone wasn't working.
Go on, go ahead, talk.
That's
why a real-world problem, a 5-axis CNC machine that I want to do some troubleshooting on, and to do that, I need to count hundreds of thousands, if not millions of steps, and make sure that during complex motions, they come back to where they're supposed to come, that steps don't disappear. And I don't need the mechanical. I've got that solved. I want to measure the pulses. I was wondering if it makes sense, if I've got an FPGA, to monitor all 5 drivers and watch their outputs and count them.
How fast are the pulses?
I'd have to think. You're going 3 inches a second. It takes a couple hundred pulses to go a fraction of an inch, so under 20K.
Done.
Okay, so that is a reasonable application, because I think that might be the first one I try and do.
Prescalers that would be pushing the ESP's capacity to do counting, although I'd have to take a close look. But the Dialog chip has 3 8-bit counters.
Okay, because what I need is 5 counting, and they count up and down. I just need to see that they all end up at 0.
Yep.
I think that there's one 16-bit on that chip too.
Okay. Okay. Because one of the challenges is sometimes when you move them at the same time. So would like to test that out and be sure. So that's cool. Thank you. I just wanted to know that it fit within the parameters.
Yeah, let's say let me take a close look, but it's that looks like easy squeezy.
Cool. Worst I do is I use 2 of them, have them coordinate at the end.
Yep.
Because they're really expensive at $10 a pop.
That's the aim, is to get a quick throwaway.
Cool.
Just throw it out there and do stuff.
All right, well then I'll get quiet because I think Paul's going to take it to the next place, which was show and tell or something like that, right?
Yep.
What I was going to say is, depending on the resolution that you absolutely have to have in your positioning, you could always add some rotary encoders.
Sure. I'm trying to count, since I won't be able to run it as long as it would really run, I'm trying to actually count pulses rather than measure the motor motion. I mean, I could use a digital probe.
Yep. No, I know what you're saying now. I'm thinking like now what you're talking, like the old mouse pads.
Right. And I could solve it with a digital probe, right? That's a standard way to solve it. I was just thinking it might be fun to solve it this way and not buy a $150 to $300 digital probe to do it with.
Yeah, I'll get back to you tomorrow and give you, I'll
all right, thanks. And there's no urgency.
Okay.
All right. Anyone have show and tell?
I've got something kinda show and tell. So
well,
also,
show us and tell us.
Okay. So a few days ago, Linux decided to make a whole bunch of changes, a whole bunch of file updates. And both of the Arduino IDEs broke in the process. So it's the new IDE plus the original editor. What happens is you move the mouse and it works fine until you get it onto the screen, on the editing screen, and the entire mouse locks up for the rest of the machine. Everything. The only way to get it back is to reboot. That I can tell. It's horrible. I actually put a bug report out there for the Arduino, the new Arduino IDE. I didn't put one out for the other one, but I think I mentioned in there that that one's affected also. Anyway, the reason why I bring that up is because I was writing a sketch for this thing. So this is a board I made, and it actually has an TFT on the back. So they kind of plug together and it kind of works. It does what it's supposed to do, but now I can't update him software. Anyway, so I said, geez, I wonder if there's any C code. So I'm using this little guy here. This is a Cduino Xiao, and they've come up with a new one. This one only works with CircuitPython and the regular Arduino IDE. And so right now that's what's on here, but I can't update it anymore. So I figured, okay, is there a Python library to support the chip that's on this thing? Well, guess what? There isn't. Matter of fact, there's hardly any Python libraries at all for any of these FTPs. So I am now in the process of writing a bunch of libraries to support these FTPs. So I don't know, I'm just an announcement that I'm doing that. It's all Python code. I can kind of show you that. It's not even close to working yet. So I basically just stubbed out the file. The big problem is, how do you get fonts in there? Because the fonts in C come in headers, and it uses Adafruit's format for fonts. So I've got a C library. Most of them have gone to Adafruit's format for fonts for these things. So I'm actually writing a piece of code right now that'll pull in the header and dump out a Python file with the same data. And then my library will then actually use the imported Python file, which the developer of whoever writes the code and uses my libraries, they would just have to do the conversions. If I don't have them already, if they want to use a different font, they can go out, find that. I'll give them the script that converts it, and they can convert it. Then they can import that into their code along with my library. So that's just a project I'm working on. I'm writing this in such a way that it'll work with various different things. So the library that this is for is the ILI 9225. There's also an ILI 9341 and an ILI 9488. The first two I'll probably do fairly soon. The other one, I don't have a TFT for it yet. I haven't ordered it. So,
are you missing for the 41?
9488 is the one I'm missing. I have a 9341. That also comes with a touch screen, so I just ordered the touch screen version of that so that my code can also do that. I don't have the touch screen here. I've just got the one that's not. The 9225 does not have a touch screen. So that's the first one I'm writing, because that's actually that's this one. And that's the one I really need to do this project. The 9488 is a much larger display. So the other one's 3 inches. This one's like up to 4 or 5 inches, I think. It's a fairly big TFT. So that's going to be the last one I do. I'm sure that's going to be more of an issue.
Question. Have you found one of these that allows reading the video memory, reading back what's being displayed?
So if you actually look, so when people write these things, they're almost always in C, made for the Arduino. They never implement that. However, if you look at the chip data sheet, you can do it.
Not on the 41. I'm very discouraged to say I beat on that as hard as I could beat, and it's conceivable, but I've seen the data sheet reference that for other chips, but for the 41, I seem to be stymied.
Well, I haven't looked at that data sheet yet. I've only been looking at the one I'm working on now, which is the 9225, the smaller one. It actually creates a smaller display. I'm putting this in a voltage current meter thingy, which I'm going to use for charging lithium-ion batteries. So I actually designed this other board, this guy. So without the display on there, that's what you got. And this I did with the JCL PCB, and I got them really fast.
Great. Another question. The SPI bus that drives these displays, are you able to run them really fast, or does it seem to be limited?
I haven't gotten there yet. So,
okay.
So the thing is that there's two ways to do it. This much I do know. You can use a software emulation for it, and that's slow, or you can use the hardware emulation, which is a lot faster. I'm going to make it switchable, the same as the original one written for Arduino. At least I may not in the first release, but I probably will. The hardware is easier because you don't have to write any extra code. So I'm going to do it for the hardware first and see how that goes. It's actually pretty fast. TFTs, though, are slower than other displays are in general. I've come up with a way in my code, this is not in the library, but in my code that uses the original Arduino library to actually determine what text has changed and only rewrite that text. So if you're, for example, if you're monitoring a current sensor or a voltage sensor and the voltage stays the same, it won't update. It'll only update if it finds that what is currently on the screen is not what the current reading is, then it'll do an update.
That sounds very much like
it lowers
the curses library.
What it does.
You know, it's very similar to the curses library where it keeps an internal buffer and then what is displayed, and it only updates the display if there's a difference.
Right. So I'm actually doing it using structs in the C++ Arduino code. I'll probably use a Python list or something like that to do it in the Python code. I'm going to have to play around with it and see if there's going to be speed issues. I'm really only in the beginnings of this. I've only been working on it for about 3 days. And so I've really only got the library stubbed out. I've got a few functions written, but now I'm working on how to deal with the fonts. Later on, I've got to deal with the SPI, and those are the two big pieces, the SPI and the fonts. The fonts are easier than the SPI, I think. The problem with the SPI is that, so this will also work on the Raspberry Pi, the MicroPython, and CircuitPython. Should be able to work on all three when I'm done. So anyway, I'll keep you guys updated on this. I don't know if anybody uses these TFT displays. They're kind of cool.
I'm interested.
Okay, well, hopefully we'll be able to do it. So you should be able to do it on any microprocessor. I'm doing it on, so I'm going to do it on the newer version of this, which can run MicroPython. This one can only run CircuitPython. CircuitPython I don't like because you can't do interrupts. CircuitPython cannot do interrupts and can't handle it. But MicroPython can. So I'm going to probably go with MicroPython in general. I don't like CircuitPython because of that. I'll make my code work with it. But anyway, we'll see.
Yeah, Adafruit appears to be allergic to interrupts.
People have asked her, and she says, "Oh, well, if you want to do the update, be my guest. Update to the code." I figured that was a cop-out. And they said, well, so their reasoning is this is for beginners. It's not for advanced users. My argument is, though, beginners become advanced users. And if they start to understand and like to use a board, and then all of a sudden they get to interrupts and realize CircuitPython can't do it, they got to change the boards they're on in order to do it with MicroPython. Because MicroPython's not going to work on Adafruit boards. So I strongly disagree with their attitude towards interrupts. I don't know what their deal is with it, but and he copied it from MicroPython. So why didn't he just do this? Granted, they're a little bit more difficult, but writing this library that I'm doing is not going to be a walk in the park. So if he knows how to do it, then do it. Anyway, that's my soapbox and something about what I'm working on right now.
All right. Thank you, Carl. Who's next?
I have.
Okay, Nick.
Project in. I play around with graphene and some very tiny structures, and for a while I've been wanting to see exactly what it was I was doing. I also wanted to be able to go around to junior highs, high schools, and actually show people atoms. So I've been building a microscope. If you have a very, very, very small probe and you bring it very, 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 very close to an atom, then what you will see is a very, very, very small amount of current, which will jump across the gap between the probe and the atom. And that is referred to as quantum tunneling. You're talking small, very smallness. So that you can build a microscope which uses that fact, and by scanning a very, very small probe across a surface, you can actually look at individual atoms. You can, if you are very good, pick up an atom and put it down someplace. But you kind of need some cryogenic equipment, and my cryogenic isn't working. But this is the microscope that I have been putting together, and it's going to go onto Kickstarter because that's what I'm going to do with it. Let's see. This is the thing that holds the microscope. It attaches to a base plate. It has a micrometer. This is a 10th micrometer that goes in to lower the probe. And so you've got a stack here, micrometer. This is all obviously very rigidly attached. That whole stage mounts around two elements, which are there's this. Where's the other one? Oh yeah, these are two piezoelectric positioners. This does the z-axis, so that by applying a voltage, in this case it's somewhere around 300 volts, you can raise and lower. This is a standard piezo horn. So you can actually, when you apply the voltage across the crystal expands or contracts and moves the horn up and down. So this gives you z-axis, which is accurate to sub-nanometer range. And this is a piezo positioner that fits on top of this. This gives me my X and Y axis. So this entire assembly fits inside this thing down here and provides a positioning stage, which should have, I'm hoping for sub-nanometer. Ideally, it would be 10th nanometer resolution, which is close to atomic resolution. The probes are made, they're platinum uridium or tungsten uridium probe, which is you take a piece of thin wire and you expose it, you put it into a caustic soda liquid, run a current through, and as the liquid erodes it, it will form a tip that is sufficient to be able to probe. The current levels are in the tens of femtoamps, which is kind of little. So you're looking at the amplifiers are unprotected, fairly specialized unprotected field effect amplifiers with bias currents in the 10 to 15 nanometer range. I'm hoping not to have to cool. I mean, the leakage current goes up with temperature. So if I can get away without using Peltier coolers to cool the amplifiers, that would be nice, but I'm not sure I can do that. So it is designed to be able to, it sits on a big plate, which is sitting on a whole bunch of silly putty. And the idea is I can take this around to, various schools and say, here, let's look at some atoms. And one of the things I do is I have a setup that makes fairly high quality graphene, and I can put a piece of graphene on that, lower the probe and scan it and look at the molecular structure. Well, that's the aim. It's a combination of some, amplifiers that have to be able to deliver 1,000 volts to be able to move the piezo cells. It's kind of takes everything to the extreme. But it's it's an interesting project. I've been playing with it for a while, and I figured if I could raise some money on a GoFundMe or something, that would kick me along. Anyone have any questions?
So the
sharpen.
Sorry.
What do you think the cost of this is going to be?
Well, they can be. My one will have ended up costing me in the thousands.
Right.
You can
the first
build
one
them.
Always does.
Yeah, you can build them. You can do a possible job with a speaker from a piezo speaker. If you quarter it properly, you can do some very, very low resolution stuff. You can do that for in the couple $100 range. My idea is that that you would provide kits to junior colleges, high schools, those kind of people, where they could actually start building them. And if nothing else, it would teach them a hell of a lot about little things. This one is designed as a research tool as much as anything else. Whether it's possible to see individual atoms, you can see atomic structures if you with a regular piezo speaker, but I don't think you can see individual atoms. I'm trying to look at individual atoms.
So the ones I've seen that are done with sort of the piezo speaker ones often also feature like a torn tungsten tip instead of what you described. I don't know what the trade-offs are. I'm curious what your thinking was there.
Well, my thinking was that I can make the handling of the probe is a bitch because the probes. So if I put the tungsten or tungsten uridium or tungsten wire into the probe and run a fairly high current, but instead of having the piezo cell have the caustic solution, then I will not have to move the probe once it has completely etched.
Got it.
Mounting a probe with a 2 or 3 nanometer tip in something is kind of
easy to screw it up.
So I want to be able to do this in situ.
So does the probe ride on the micrometer thing at the top?
Yeah, the probe comes down. It attaches to the micrometer thing. You get it close to this. You get it close, and then the piezo stage has a fair degree of travel. So the
piezo stage moves the sample around.
Yeah, the piezo stage provides z-axis, so you get close with the micrometer, and then this provides the z-axis. So this moves it up the final distance. There are 2 modes you run this in. One is you maintain a constant distance above the surface, constant current, and the other is that you look at the variation in current. The whole thing runs into a 32-bit A to D converter, and it's designed with it's designed to be pretty sensitive. So I'm hoping, although it's admittedly ambitious, I'm hoping to get single atom resolution. I'd like to be able to look at the plasmon emissions when you hit a piece of graphene with light. You'll see a plasmon move across the surface, and I'd like to be able to see that.
Where did you get the graphene from?
I make it.
You make your own graphene, really?
Yes.
That's an incredibly cool substance, and they've really only begun using it for things at this point.
I have most of my nano work was done on indium nitride and 3.5 semiconductors, indium nitride, gallium nitride. I've got some patents. The graphene, I came up with a process, a slightly different way of making it that is extremely gentle. Most of them are kind of rough on the surface, and the graphene will tend to curl and make tubes. I came up with an extremely gentle way of doing it. strangely, it worked. Nothing more shocking than that. So yeah, I have a graphene reactor that makes, admittedly at this point, small quantities, but you can make ultra high efficiency batteries. It's a good substitute for lithium ion, and has, as I say, it provides an interesting base for doing semiconductor work. But yeah, I make graphene.
Cool.
So that's it's been, it's
an
that's one of the things.
It's an extremely strong and durable substance. Even at 1 atom thick, it's very hard to get through it.
Oh yeah. No, it is, doing the separation from the separating a monoatomic layer of graphene is kind of an interesting trick. And then, with this, I can confirm that I'm doing that. It's a you got to kind of be careful. Atoms are small.
All right, thanks for that. Keep us updated.
Oh, I will. I say it's I figured it was time to to show somebody else what I've been playing with. It's a fun toy.
Yeah, I'd love to see that when you finally get it working and COVID.
Not as much as I would love to see it. It is, as I don't know that I can. Everything is done. I have created synthetic atoms. I've got at least some idea of what an atom is, which is very small, and so it's still the idea that in a that I can create that I can look at individual atoms in Apex, North Carolina, borders on absurdity, but that's never stopped me before. I got graphene in Apex, North Carolina, so why not a tunneling electron microscope? I have the amplifier, the high voltage amplifiers, and the low current amplifiers, and the 32-bit, which is a 6.5-digit sensor. They're all done.
Okay. Anybody else have something to show and tell?
Sure, but I don't want to get in the way of somebody else does. Mine are not as exciting, I'm afraid.
Go for it.
But I'm proud of them. So one of them is this little thing here. I might do better if I share a desktop. What I did is I've been learning to do CAD better than I've done it before. Can you all see my CAD drawing here?
Yes.
So the challenge is that at the forge, someone lost the battery cover for one of our nicer calipers. It's not that nice. It's a $40 caliper. But the little cover that keeps the coin cell in disappeared. So I wondered how fine a work my 3D printer could do and how well I could model something that would work. So I modeled this. You all do CAD, so there's nothing really revolutionary here. But I did it, and I felt good about that. And
did you have an example of it? So you had
no, I just had
caliper?
the place it went.
Oh, okay.
So what I had was
negative space.
Right. I'm back to being a picture now, maybe. So what I had was this, which is you can. Boy, my camera really doesn't focus very well. I think I need to do something about it.
It's your background blur is what's.
Yeah,
do I have blur turned on?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, let me turn that off, and things should be better. How do you do that on this?
Triple dots.
Triple dots on me, and it says flip or hide self view.
Select background.
Select background. There it is. Those triple dots, different ones. Get rid of none. Okay, none.
Yeah,
oh wow, I think that's going to be better. It looks blur still. Hold on. select background, none. Oh, apply.
There you go.
Wow, my camera focuses so much better this way.
Yeah.
So here's the thing I held up before, which is just what you saw in CAD. And then here is this, and all I had was the negative space for the caliper. And I did go through several prints because I was just using an old printer bot, simple metal. So I did 4 or 5 prints before I really got everything just right, because it turns out the drawing dimensions and the resulting dimensions aren't an exact fit. But they're close enough, and it now turns out that where this screw is, the original one snapped in, but there was a hole there for no good reason. Well, it was part of how the snap. There was a little bus there that popped into a hole, but the hole had edges, so I was able to put an M3 screw and position it so it goes right into the existing hole, and then it works. So I was really kind of proud of that because it's a dumb little thing, but it worked, and I haven't used CAD for a lot of practical things in life. The other thing I want to show you, I have 2. Is that allowed? You have to swear that if you show up for the robotics teams, you don't admit you've ever seen anything like this, okay?
I know what it is.
Because what I did is they showed me something that they found out on the internet that they said, this is way too hard. We could never make a thing like that. We have to get that other group to tell us how they did it. It's just way too hard, and they couldn't get the information they needed. And then when they did get it, they still didn't know what to do with it, the CAD drawings. So I wanted to make sure I could mentor them through it. I wanted to see that I could do it before I said, oh, it'll be fine. And then I started helping them, and it turns out to be much harder than I thought. So their job is to grab onto a monkey bar with a robot. So voila, you're on the monkey bar. It works every time. You can afford to miss. You can move around in here. You come in like that. You still end up on the monkey bar. And there is a release that this one doesn't have. There's a catted but not cut version. And then I cut this on the CNC machine that I built in my basement out of polyethylene. So that was also fun that I cut it on my homemade CNC. Anyway, there. See? Brief, but I was proud of my... I had to CAD it and cut it, and it had to work. This little bit here represents a misunderstanding of the dimensions that I corrected for by zip tying in a little piece of something to make it work right. I have since made one that has the right dimensions, and now I've helped students without giving them anything other than like, sure, we can do it, and then helping them think it through, and occasionally having a handy SVG around. They're now making their own. And they stopped using my SVG. They decided to cut it out on a scroll saw instead of using any CNC. And so now they actually own the thing they've made, which is really cool because they're beginning to think they can figure out how to do it. And they're experimenting with modifications that are their own idea, which is, of course, the idea. It's no good to teach them how to build one claw. It's teaching them how to act, giving them the feeling that if they experiment, they might figure something out. It might actually work. But that's why you can't tell them I have this. If they
life's disappointments.
Right. It's okay that it doesn't work along the way as long as you get there. But if you tell them I had this, they'll stop believing they figured anything out on their own. And they did figure a lot out on their own. So I don't want that to happen to them. I want them to keep understanding that the version they've got is not the version I've got, and they figured it out. Because that way they'll try the next thing where I won't even be there.
Yeah, teach them how to fish. Don't give them the fish.
Right. It's easy to give fish.
Take them out to lunch.
Do what, Dylan?
Take them out to lunch. It's a nice fish restaurant in Durham.
There you go. Well, I always liked the Terry Pratchett version. You all know that, right? It's simple. If you come in and you light a fire for a man when he's cold, he'll be warm for one evening. But if you come in and you set a man on fire, he will be warm for the rest of his life.
Well, you know how you can always get warm in a cold house? Go into any corner. It's always 90 degrees.
That's better than Terry Pratchett and much less violent. Anyway, thank you for letting me show you my things that I made this time.
Thank you. Okay, next. Anybody else? Great. All right, I've got a little quick one I'm going to show. So when I take my sand bony various places, I have a little Wi-Fi access point router thing and a Raspberry Pi Zero and my ESP chips that all want to, talk MQTT to the Raspberry Pi, and turning it off and on by plugging and unplugging it is a sure way to corrupt your SD card. And so I wanted a little safe shutdown switch for my Raspberry Pi. So I did a little Google search and found somebody who's already done it. And so the idea is you pick one of the GPIOs, and they chose GPIO 26, which happens to be right next to a ground pin. So I soldered in a little 2-pin JST connector. So here it is soldered into my Pi Zero, and then I created a little jumper thing that has the other end of a JST and a little push button. The idea is you press the push button and the Pi says, "Oh, you want me to shut down? Good night." And so here's the software. It creates a button on GPIO 26, and then in infinite loop, it looks every minute to see if the button is pressed. It sleeps for another second. If it's still pressed, then it does a shutdown.
So I really like that. I did wonder, do you think there'd be an interest if we did a workshop on ways to harden the Linux OS so that it survives being shut down abruptly better?
Yeah. The way it's normally done is you make the user directory read-only.
Right. There's a bunch of different. When I was working at Cisco, we had a lot of different network equipment we deployed that I had to bring up on Linux, and obviously you can't put something out with 5 or 6 nines that crashes sometimes if it gets unplugged. So that was a thing I ended up having to do for a while. So if you're familiar with it, then we could collaborate and write out some of the different approaches people take to different parts of it.
Yeah.
I remember how to do it under Unix. I haven't done it to Linux per se.
Well,
I will say, at a previous company I worked on, a previous company I worked on, they took the approach of putting a super cap in, and when they detected that the power was disconnected, the super cap gave it enough time to shut down.
Right. UPS is a way to go. That's one of the ways.
Yeah. So there are problems with actually making the user directory read-only, and that is a sysadmin has to go in and fix that or change that every time there's an update.
Right, and there are a number of different.
That is the standard way to do it. At least the years long, many years. That's the way to do it. I like the super cap idea, but that all depends on how much current, how much power that machine is running.
Right. Well, you can put a battery on it. You can design a solution to that.
Yeah. But there's always going to be a least common denominator somewhere in there.
You should also choose your file system wisely.
Yes.
The type of the file system. Some file systems are really brittle compared to others.
Yeah. Essentially stick with a journaled file system. Anything that's journaled should be fine. So the way that works is the first thing the operating system does is they write something to the journal, which is on the drive, right? Before it actually gets distributed to the correct place on the drive. It all goes in a journal. That way, if something dies, well, when it comes back up again, guess what? There's a journal that says this stuff has still got to go in.
I'm interested in hearing the methods that Rob's come up with. I'm not sure I have any particular need for it, but it sounds like you've done this successfully at Cisco.
Right. I'm not sure I have a whole lot that's brilliantly different. I just have, we did it a number of different ways on a number of different platforms and pieces of equipment. And there are different approaches you can take. And recently they've offered some new facilities in Linux that make it so that some of it's easier. But yes, they all have trade-offs. Carl, you're absolutely right.
One of the approaches that another company I worked at did, to keep them with the read-only user file system, user home directory, they would copy that stuff over to a RAM drive, work everything from the RAM drive while you're operating, and at various intervals, write the RAM drive to permanent storage. And you may lose, depending on the embedded system, you're not going to lose that much. You know what I'm saying?
Depends on what you're doing.
5
right.
minutes
If your job is to log, you're in trouble.
Directory.
But if your runtime is all that matters, not too bad. That's what they've introduced. There's now a RAM overlay to the whole file system that Raspberry Pi comes with that you can just enable. But it does face the thing Carl spoke of. You have to turn it off, turn it on in order to make updates.
But also doing that, if you're using a journaled file system, you wouldn't need to do that, because that method works great. Well, I shouldn't say it works great, but that method is better than nothing for a non-journaled system.
Absolutely.
A journaled system,
it's not perfect.
It actually does it on the drive itself.
Yeah, it's called a two-phase commit.
Yeah, probably no reason to offer that. There's a lot of people here who already know how to do it. Maybe one of you guys would like to help the people who don't know how.
Well, journaling file system means you'd have to actually format your drives with one of the journal types that exist, which means you'd probably get a brand new drive and then copy your data over to it.
Right. I didn't mean right now. That's okay.
Yeah.
I'd like a good idea on how to make copies of my SD card, backups of my SD card on my Raspberry Pis.
That's an interesting.
Just DD it off into a file.
That doesn't work on Windows.
Well, because you don't have DD.
If you have a separate SD card slot, you can.
You don't. I'm talking about a Raspberry Pi Zero. I can DD it, but where do I DD it to, right? There is no other storage other than one SD card.
So if you're willing to use software that you install on Windows, there are some utilities. One of them is Win32 Disk Imager. I don't think you can capture so well with Balena Etcher, but with Win32 Disk Imager, you can capture a disk image. So on Windows, if that helps. I spend a lot of time on Raspberry Pis right now for work, so maybe that helps. That's how I capture images for that.
And you can
Paul, instead of using a Pi to duplicate your SD cards, if you had like your standard laptop or something with 2 slots or even one, you copy off a DD image of one SD card onto a file on your hard disk, and then you can duplicate it. You can write that to another SD card and then write it to another SD card and then write it to another SD card.
If you have
if you have a Linux desktop.
Actually, I've done that under the old Cygwin as well.
When I stick an SD card from the Pi into my Windows machine, it opens up like 13 drives. D through
Me
Z.
every time, and I have to just tell it, I'm sorry, I'm using WinDisk Imager. I'm sorry.
And it takes you 20 minutes to dismiss all those dialogues.
It's insane. Linux is much nicer for all that. I just put a link in the chat.
It screws up the Arduino IDE.
You saw the link there, Paul?
Yeah, I'll look at that.
Yeah, SourceForge. SourceForge used to be something I felt pretty good about. I don't know how reliable in terms of security is, but this is a very commonly used tool that seems to get pretty good ratings, and I use it. And so far, it hasn't taken over my machine as far as I know. But I regularly copy out images and give them to people using this, and then they use either Balena or this to put it on, or you can DD it on if you are on a Linux machine.
Okay, I have Balena Etcher.
Right, which will certainly write the images, but this is a way of capturing them.
Okay.
So yeah, I hope that helps.
I'll give it a look, see. I do have a Linux box. I guess I could get another.
Do it on a Raspberry Pi, a big one. Go from the small one to the bigger one.
Can you DD it while it's running?
Yes.
You'd need a second place to put a card
I mean,
in.
I can plug in a thumb drive with my other card on it. And
Yeah,
so
DD doesn't care. DD doesn't care that it's running.
Okay.
Well,
for the most
DD
part.
doesn't care, but your next boot may.
Yes.
Mind you, don't run an application in background when you're DDing. It just that's a good strategy.
Yeah, don't. The file system should be dormant when you're copying it. You should not
or put 2 external readers on and boot to one disk and copy from one to another. Right, copy from another SD card reader to a USB thumb or something.
Yeah.
I mean, that's another way to do it. It's
in
slow,
other words,
though.
3 SD cards.
Right, that's just slow. Your laptop with Win32 disk imager is pretty quick.
Yeah, you're probably going to want to use a Raspberry Pi 4 with sufficient memory for buffering and whatnot to do it right. But yeah, that's possible.
I just hate having to reconstruct. Now, what did I install after I put in the this and I updated and upgraded and
now you can always create your own install Raspbian, your own your very own distro, and you can set it up so that your config files and your init files are all set the way you want them to when you install the packages.
Have you done that, Scott?
Oh yeah.
Okay, because I'm getting ready to think about doing that. I'd love to talk with you about it at some point.
The person you really want to talk to is Peter Renches.
Okay.
Most of the distros have instructions on how to do that with their distro.
Right, they do. But talking with someone who's done it brings up the things that you didn't realize they didn't write down.
Yeah, right.
What Peter started with was, instead of taking Raspbian, he started from a scratch, pure low-level Debian and built up what he needed. He literally had to figure out what it is that he had to have in a Raspberry Pi image in order to run the Pi the way he wanted.
Like
so that way he
Gentoo
left out a lot
mid-90s.
of stuff that he left out a lot of stuff that he didn't need.
Right. Just like doing a minimal Gentoo back in like 1997, 98 or whenever it was when they first came out. That almost threw me off the edge. I almost quit completely with that. I went from Slackware to Gentoo, and it was like, you have to be kidding me. But then I had a lot of fun. Nowadays, I don't know if Gentoo is quite that raw anymore, but it used to be.
Well, if you want to sit there for hours and hours and hours while the thing literally compiles every package you put on.
Well, that's what I did. I remember doing that.
But it's fast.
It's fast.
I'll tell you what.
Not on the computer I had in 1998 or 9.
Fast if you got 24 hours.
Exactly. Recently at work, we had to do that because we're redoing some of the libraries for security updates. And it's building its own distro that we use in our system. Damn if that didn't take 16 hours. And that's off a bunch of VMs.
I used to compile Linux kernels all the time back in the early days of Linux. I haven't done it in many, many years at this point.
Well, I compiled the kernels, but this with Gentoo in like 98, 99, whenever it was like what he's describing, the whole thing. Well, you've done it, obviously. You just described it.
Yeah,
the whole thing. From compiler all the way up.
And every single package, every single cross config.
Right. I'm no longer competent to do that kind of thing. I'm pretty sure of it.
Not to mention the package config and building the packages.
Sure, I haven't done it in years, but I'm sure that the current system is probably you set it off, let it start, and walk away for 24 hours. Come back, you got an OS running.
I could make 2 announcements for everybody.
All right.
I wanted everyone to be aware I'd like to try to do a local Raspberry Pi jam. It would be the 3rd Saturday of March, which is a couple of days before Pi Day. I'm trying to check my calendar right now, make sure I can tell you what date. Thinking March 12th.
How is that the 3rd Saturday of March?
Saturday afternoon.
It's the 2nd Saturday.
That makes more sense.
Yeah, you're right. It is.
It's the right Saturday, though.
So, anywho, that's I was thinking of doing a Raspberry Pi jam, and I still haven't gotten all my thoughts together and make the announcement out to the world. But be looking for it. We're looking for participants and see what happens. Also, the RARS folks have announced their Hamfest Easter weekend on that Saturday, and I'd like TriEmbed to be a part. I've already contacted the folks about getting a discount on tables, and we'd have our island of non-for-profit tables again.
What day is that?
My calendar.
When is that, Scott?
It's the Saturday of Easter. I'm thinking that's around the 17th.
Of April?
April 17th. No, April 16th. Tell you what, I'll go to the RARS website and check it for sure.
Yep. It's a Saturday's the 16th.
Yeah, so they're supposed to get back with me soon about how much tables are going to be for our group, and then everybody be responsible for their own tickets.
Okay, yeah, let us know.
I'll be part of that.
So I just wanted to get a heads up on all that. Yeah, April 16th, Saturday, April 16th.
The normal place?
The
I'm
fairground.
thinking that. Yep. Oh well, yeah, it's always at the fairground, but yeah, they have the Jim Graham building again.
Okay.
Yep. So anywho, I don't have any show and tell for tonight, but those couple announcements, I just wanted people to be aware.
All right, anybody else have anything? If not, 2 weeks from now should be a meeting of the league, and in March we'll do this again. All right.
All righty.
Good night, everyone.
By the way, Carl, I pointed the people at Dialogue who I'm talking to the YouTube videos.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna kill this one now, and then we can all leave.